Continuation of Chapter 9. The State's Duty, Repress Religious Error. Pope Pius IX continues, quote, "Contrary to the teachings of the Holy Scriptures, of the Church, and of the Holy Fathers, these persons do not hesitate to assert that the best condition of human society is that wherein no duty is recognized by the government of correcting, by enacted penalties, the violators of the Catholic religion, except when the maintenance of the public peace requires it." End quote. Yet, this is exactly the position that was affirmed by the Declaration on Religious Liberty. To be opposed to all coercion, even public, is tantamount to pronouncing oneself against the Catholic state. But a Catholic state is one that affirms that the Catholic religion is the public religion of the state, and that it is the only one recognized by the government. By doing so, it protects the truth. It protects the true religion. And it is evident that as far as possible, but without having recourse to measures that would be extreme and unlivable, it should keep errors from spreading, and prevent Protestantism and the sects from coming and, little by little, undermining the unity of the Catholic faith of the country. For if it did not, that would end not only by destroying the Church, but also by overthrowing the Catholic government of the country. This is what has happened in many countries because of the weakness of the governments, which let the sects and false religions into the country. One fine day the government was overtaken and overturned. Or else, if a Catholic head of state acts against error, he is suppressed. Such was the history of the President of the State of Ecuador, Garcia Moreno. His enemies assassinated him. It is the duty of the state to protect the faith of the Catholic faithful against errors, as it is its duty to prevent immorality from spreading. A right to freedom of error. All of this, which had been affirmed by Pius IX, was denied by the Declaration on Religious Liberty. Quote, "From this totally false notion of social government, they fear not to uphold that erroneous opinion most pernicious to the Catholic Church and to the salvation of souls, which was called by our predecessor Gregory XVI the insanity, namely, that the liberty of conscience and of worship is the peculiar or inalienable right of every man, which should be proclaimed by law, and that citizens have the right to all kinds of liberty, to be restrained by no law, whether ecclesiastical or civil, by which they may be enabled to manifest openly and publicly their ideas, by word of mouth, through the press, or by any other means. But whilst these men make these rash assertions, they do not reflect or consider that they preach the liberty of perdition, and that, if it is always free to human arguments to discuss, men will never be wanting who will dare to resist the truth, and to rely upon the loquacity of human wisdom, when we know from the command of our Lord Jesus Christ how faith and Christian wisdom ought to avoid this most mischievous vanity." End quote. Yet, the text of the Declaration on Religious Liberty, Dignitatis Humanae, Section 2, affirms that, quote, This right of the human person to religious freedom must be given such recognition in the constitutional order of society as will make it a civil right." End quote. It also claims that every religion has the right to be publicly organized in civil society and have its own schools, newspapers, and to teach by the spoken or written word. All of this is clearly contained in Dignitatis Humanae. One reads there, quote, "These groups have a right to immunity so that they may organize themselves according to their own principles. They must be allowed to honor the Supreme Godhead with public worship." End quote. Religious liberty or toleration. Bea versus Ottaviani. It is for this reason that, during the meetings of the Central Preparatory Commission of the Council, Cardinal Ottaviani was so vigorously opposed to Cardinal Bea, who absolutely wanted to see the Council adopt religious liberty. He had written at the head of his schema, De Libertate Religiosa, whereas Cardinal Ottaviani had written De Tolerantia Religiosa. The difference is quite clear. Error is tolerated to the degree that it cannot be suppressed, but if one can, one should. The goal is always to pursue and destroy error, and confront it with the truth. But in certain states, there comes a moment when, because of the circumstances or the number of Catholics, that is no longer possible, when public order could no longer be assured, and peace would be endangered. The Church has always recognized this. Pope Leo XIII stated that, in his encyclical Libertas, toleration is a legitimate course of action. But de libertate religiosa, as meant by Cardinal Bea, is freedom accorded in principle to all the religions, freedom of opinion, freedom for all to publicly express whatever they will. Such a view exactly contradicts what Pope Pius IX proclaimed in his encyclical CUANTA CURA. It is unthinkable.